All right, hit it, Tim.
Welcome to Chapter Connect. I'm your host, Dr. Tim Radke, Vice President for Chapters at the Explorers Club. Last week, we had a special presentation for you celebrating the International Year of Caves and Karst. Today, we're taking you to the South Florida chapter of the Explorers Club, which is chaired by Bruce Matheson. Bruce, welcome to Chapter Connect.
Thank you very much, Tim. Welcome, everybody. This is the Southern Florida chapter of the Explorers Club, incorporated in 1972, and we have approximately 40 members, and we have some very interesting members of our club here tonight. And we're going to start with Patrick Griffith. Patrick is the head of the Montgomery Foundation here in Miami. The Montgomery Foundation has one of the largest collections of palms and cycads in the world. Patrick, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And it's great to see everybody. I'm Patrick Griffith, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you today about discovering new palms. And hopefully you can see my screen now. But I'm pretty new to the chapter, but very excited to be a part of this club. It's really fantastic. Just for some context, this is where I work. It's a botanic garden called Montgomery Botanical Center, and it's in Coral Gables. And we grow lots of palm trees and cycads. These are all the places that we've collected those palms from. And you can see we've been quite active for a long time, but particularly in the last several years, in the last decade, we've had a lot of activity in the New World. This is a map that just shows my own personal plant explorations. And I put the past 24 months there because 2019, I sure did a lot of travel, but 2020 is quite different. But what I want to talk about is some explorations in Bonaire and Curacao in the Southern Caribbean, and two new palmetto species that we discovered. So this is how we plan these expeditions. We look at where we've been and we think about where we need to go. And what I noticed was there were no collections from the Netherlands Antilles. So I looked at the texts on this and I discovered that there's actually some palms there, but they didn't know what to call them. They were calling it Sable causiarum. And when I looked at some of the biologist photos online, it really inspired me to go there because it was this very wild and remote habitat. So I went to the main source for this genus Sable, and he only mentions Curacao once. And when he did, he said that the palm growing there was Sable mauritiiformis. And I thought, that doesn't seem right at all, because that's that real tropical looking one on the right, where the palms on Curacao look like these desert plants. The guy he quoted is Vessel's Boer, so I actually dug up his specimen at New York Botanical Garden, and it turns out this is not mauritiiformis at all. And I consulted the only real piece of literature that exists on these palms, and that's a master's thesis from 50 years ago. And this is an old mimeograph, and I had to hand translate that from Dutch. But that led me to go to Curacao from Miami. And these palms occur on the far side of this mountain, Christoffelberg. It's the tallest mountain in Curacao. I talked to the local authorities and got access through a road that goes to the other side of the mountain. So they gave me a key, and I went along over to the other side, and I saw the first palm. And with the sun angle being in front of me, I didn't really know what I was looking at till I turned around, and it was this absolutely incredible vista, beautiful place with these palms. And as soon as I saw that, I knew it was a different species. It really comes from this very windy and arid habitat, but it has a really compact crown that's quite different from all other palms, especially sables. It has a really short leaf stalk as well. That's what makes it look so compact. So I spent some time making a very important specimen of this. There's the specimen being prepared. And that's now the type specimen over at New York Botanical Garden. I spent some time cleaning seeds, and you can see quite a few different mother plants there. But the seeds are actually quite different from Causiarum also. They're basically much bigger and heavier. Spent a few days documenting the habitat, getting lots of good photographs, and then I went to Bonaire. My first stop was a government office to get permission and directions, and this was the easiest way to document exactly where he told me to go. That's the government official's hand. He led me to this place that's right next to a neighborhood called Sable Palm Villas. Seems like the right place, doesn't it? We'll talk about that character on the right in a moment. So I made a specimen from Bonaire, and this is now described as a new species, Sable antilensis, and it made the cover of Phytotaxa. But that specimen from Bonaire was actually a real challenge. I had to prepare this for shipping due to the different import and customs regulations. And I had 2 boxes, and many different regulations apply to those. 7 weeks later, which is way too long, it should have arrived in a week. This arrived and it was in terrible shape, and I only got 1 box. So it's not a beautiful specimen, but it is actually the only specimen ever made from that island of this species. So we have many seedlings from Curacao, but we only have a single seedling from Bonaire. So do I need to go back? Of course. So I did a second trip to get more seeds and spent a lot more time with these palms documenting the habitat. This is now my absolute favorite plant. Seeds were very abundant on that second trip. And then I went to Bonaire. And on Bonaire, the first evening, again, I had to look at these palms out on the horizon. But the next morning, this is what stood between me and those palms. And the truth is, these guys are standing between all of us and the future of these palms because they eat a lot of seedlings. So we did a conservation survey. This is me working with a local botanist, Karine. And what we discovered is that the palm's range has shrunk dramatically in 50 years, and also the number of palms has gone down quite a bit. And that's the opposite of what's happened on Curacao. In Curacao, they're protected in a protected area. So these guys look cute and they're beloved by many, but they're actually super predators if you're a seedling. So we really got to watch out for them. So we prepared a report for the Bonaire government, and they're working to conserve the palms. And this story made the cover of Palms Journal, so we're very happy about that. And we've described now a second new species, Ceiba lahidiana. And this is named after Dr. Lynn Lougheed, who's a member of our Southern Florida chapter. So what about those seeds? This is me on a very happy day, walking out of the airport in Miami with the seeds in my hand. The authorities let me do this on that day. Typically, I have to send them to the inspection station. And we're very excited because we're moving forward with a project to fence off the majority of these palms. This is through a generous grant from Seacology, which likes to protect island habitats. So very happy to be moving forward. And please contact me anytime because I love talking about palms.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Our next speaker is Professor Messing. Professor Messing is going to take us deep down into the ocean to look at some very small pieces of his major interest, which has been his interest for years. He's a professor lately and retired now from Nova Southeastern in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Chuck, please begin.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to just jump in here with my presentation and start it up. Just make sure I get the right thing going here. Yep. So I called this Messing with the Deep because much of my work has been in deep water. My research career began my first year of graduate school at the University of Miami's Marine Lab in 1970, when I was invited to join the first of a series of deep sea dredging expeditions, including one that dredged the bottom of the Puerto Rico Trench over 7,000 meters down. And we collected, and I got to describe and illustrate this little 1-inch long crustacean, my first scientific paper, the deepest crustacean in the Atlantic Ocean. In 1975, I got my first Alvin dive, and I've been using submersibles ever since, Johnson Sea Link and the Triton subs, for example. And I got that first Alvin dive when my professor said, "Ain't no way you're getting me down on that thing." I've also had the opportunity to use a wide variety of remotely operated vehicles, including NOAA's Deep Discoverer. And these two approaches plus scuba have allowed me to do my research on crinoids, which are echinoderms related to sea stars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers. And for those of you who don't know, I went back too fast there. Let me go back, previous. A crinoid is basically a sea star on a stick with the mouth up. And they are the only living echinoderms with a stalk. The body is a little cup-like calyx, and they've got these feathery arms with side branches called pinnules. And you can see from this, the arms typically divide, and they are suspension feeders on plankton. A few of them cling to the sea floor with hooks, and a handful cement to the sea floor directly with the calyx. but the vast majority of them are feather stars. They lose the stalk when they're tiny little juveniles. And these are the only crinoids that are found in shallow water. Now you may ask, who cares about such an obscure group of organisms? But it turns out that they can be abundant and even dominant in a wide range of marine habitats from the deep sea to shallow coral reefs. And you never know where a taxonomy is going to lead you. I described this feather star in 1995 from Papua New Guinea. And quite a number of years later, these researchers found that an extract of this particular species had some activity against hepatitis C. So you never know. My colleagues and I also discovered that some of these stalk crinoids can unhook and lie down, crawl along the seafloor, which turned out to have important implications for the evolution of predation, because they evolved this feature around the same time that, and now we stop there, let's see if I can get forward there, around the same time that their pencil urchin predators evolved the ability to crunch on such hard skeletoned and hard-shelled prey about 200 million years ago. So that was another interesting thing. I've had the opportunity to do work on a lot of deep water hard bottom substrates, environmental impact surveys, conservation research, and also work on deep sea coral habitats, which it turns out account for more seafloor real estate than all of the shallow water reefs combined, including the Great Barrier Reef. So we've been looking at diversity and distribution. I'm also extremely interested in public outreach of science. About 10 years ago, I did a couple of episodes of a show called Messing with Nature, which you can see on Vimeo, Google Messing with Nature Vimeo. They never got picked up because marketing said, no, we're just interested in action adventure, but I have hopes. And just similarly, I have hopes to try to find folks who might be interested in developing Ken Burns' little mini-series on the history of deep sea exploration. So to wrap up, I've also written a children's book, which is Who Eats Who in the Ocean. These are a couple of the facing pages. It's all in rhyme. It's for food chains, and it's mostly for 9 to 11-year-olds. You look up Book Baby, or you look to my webpage, charlesmessing.com. I was asked, in the rehearsal, they said, go ahead and shill for your product. So that's what I'm doing. I've got a schoolroom type poster of marine life in the open ocean, from bacteria to whales and the surface to the deep. And you can find that on eBay. And I've also got a couple of copies of this print I did, giclée prints of an acrylic painting I did of a lionfish. And those are for sale. You see my email address there, messingchaz@gmail.com, if you're interested. And thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Chuck has been very generous over the years in letting us have our meetings. He's hosted our Explorers Club meetings at the Nova Southeastern University campus in Fort Lauderdale. If you're exploring around the world, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is your health. And so you can go out, but you would like to come back in the same health you were in when you went out. So who else to ask but Dr. Mike Manyak, MD, who will tell us about surviving in the world of exploring.
Well, thank you very much, Bruce, and welcome to my new colleagues in this chapter. I'm trying to get this thing up and running for a second, so bear with me. We should be here. All right, that should be good. Can you see it? Okay, good, super. Okay, well, I was in the Washington chapter for 27 years, so some of you may know me from there, and I've been very active with the Explorers Club on a national level, where I'm a medalist, a Sweeney medalist, and I'm also an associate editor of the Explorers Journal. So you see my column on expedition medicine on a regular basis. So I do a lot of other things. I'm not going to list or discuss them right now, but some of them are listed here. And the common thread through all of this is medicine. I work a lot with coronavirus issues right now, actually. So it's an interesting time indeed. So here are the expeditions I've been on, and I'm going to show you a few selected photos. You know, each one of these could be an hour-long talk, and I'm sure that's true for all of my colleagues too. You know, with the stuff, they're very interesting presentations before me. I like them both, and you know, but we have a short time here, so I'm just going to briefly go through some of these things. I've been down to the Titanic on a salvage expedition, in Central African jungles with the National Geographic Explorer series. Antarctica, an icebreaker with scientists and students. Dived the Atocha, the treasure galleon, the most famous one. It's down here in Florida. Deepest canyon in the world in Peru. And then to Mongolia a couple different times. One for the first scientific dive in Mongolia, and then the second time for the wild camel expedition. I also was fortunate enough to be one of the first people to evaluate a brand new discovery of early human footprints in Tanzania of Homo sapiens. And then I've developed some programs for the Scouts that I'm going to share with you a little bit here. So I've published books about this. Expedition and Wilderness Medicine is a textbook for physicians and for expedition leaders. That's more of a textbook though. And so I created something for the general public that likes to travel. And this is called Lizard Bites and Street Riots. And it was in one of the top 5 books selected in travel in 2016 when it was published by both USA Today and International Book Awards. There will be a second edition coming out in March, so stay tuned. We've got some updates in there. So let's just talk about some of the expeditions. The one that gets a lot of people's attention is the one that when I was able to go down to the Titanic in the submersibles that you see in the movies. And this is my photo from the submersible of the Titanic. And so this was a salvage expedition. There have only been 2 of those. And it was a fantastic experience, obviously. Takes 3 hours to go straight down in those submersibles. And then we spent 12 hours in total, 6 of them collecting artifacts. So here you can see the submersible that's actually a converted Soyuz space capsule with a 2.5-inch titanium hull. And then portholes that are 8 inches thick. You can see here, I was the co-pilot on that particular trip. My favorite picture the whole time is the one in the right lower quadrant, which is a man's hat that we found on the floor since over almost 100 years when the Titanic had gone down. So fantastic, so medical problems you have out there, it's a remote site. You've got all kinds of other issues going on. And just think, I have to think about all this stuff. So when people are drinking coffee, I'm worried about a piece of equipment landing on somebody. Now, next, go to the Central African jungle, where I went with the executive producer of National Geographic Explorer. We were looking to do a larger expedition and went hunting with the pygmies with crossbows and poison arrows as they went looking for their dinner. And they kept telling me to be quiet because I'm this big white guy rumbling through the jungle there, scaring away the game. So they were phenomenal people. I really enjoyed them. The place was loaded with animals. You can see this forest elephant walked out right in front of us. Couldn't see him, couldn't hear him, 10 feet away. Water supply was around there. You just cut down one of those vines and able to drink cold, clear, pure water out of a vine. And I also had to share my cabana with some other denizens of the jungle there. These spiders, these are they call them rain spiders because they come in and rain when it rains. Well, it's a rainforest, so it rains every day. So the spiders are always inside. And these are huntsman spiders, some of the largest spiders in the world, as you can see the size of these things. So very interesting time indeed. Then on to Antarctica, which I went with a group that's taking 100 students down to do scientific experiments with scientists. Fantastic place, phenomenally beautiful. I couldn't believe blue and gray could be that pretty. It's amazing. And loaded with life. They have some of the most populous areas for wildlife are in the Southern Ocean. We did have some excitement on the trip, though. There was a tourist ship that got trapped in the pack ice, and we had to break our way through. We were the closest icebreaker. We were 16 hours away. If we hadn't come, they would have crushed that boat. So they were pretty happy to see us. For me, it was the easiest thing I've had to do on any kind of a rescue. I just sat, drank coffee, and let the captain do his job. So that was a good thing, but interesting. The kids were all excited. Then I was very fortunate to be one of the first 4 people that evaluated a brand new finding of early human footprints in northern Tanzania in a very remote area that the Maasai had found. This is volcanic ash that is hardened like cement. And there were 24 footprints present when we got there that you could see like on the left there. That's clearly human activity. And we uncovered another 37, including the one that I uncovered 8 or 9 myself. Was a huge thrill. This is now a World Heritage Site with over 500 footprints and had huge publications within the last year and a half in major professional journals about the significance of this site. Very fascinating, but dry and dusty and all the problems of a remote area that you have. Next topic here is I've been able to go with the Smithsonian, the Human Origins Program. Dr. Rick Potts, who is the chairman of the Human Origins Program, is a close friend and is Explorers Club Fellow and awardee for the Lowell Thomas Award. And these are million-year-old early human artifacts that we're digging. It's a highly productive site and fascinating. But again, hot and dry, remote, all kinds of issues with that kind of climate. Then I've been able to go on the first scientific dive in Mongolia. This was a flag expedition and was in, Mongolia is landlocked. So you say, how do you do a dive in Mongolia? Well, there's a large freshwater lake on the northern border with Siberia that has 1% to 2% of the world's fresh water. For those of you who have been around the Great Lakes, it looks like one of the Great Lakes, although it's not quite as big as them. Anyway, it has Russian ships that are sunken there. Remember, Russia had Mongolia for a while there for about 30 or 40 years. And we found wrecks in the water. And then these fish that are cod species that were all over the place, very curious. Mongolians don't eat fish. So whether it's a cultural or religious thing, I'm not sure. But I would have loved to get one of those on the plate over the fire, but we didn't do that. We were respectful and didn't fish. But a lot of problems. This is at 5,000 feet of elevation. So your dive tables are changed and it's cold. Remember, Siberia. So we had thermoclines and it was a dry dive suit dive. Next, the deepest canyon in the world in Peru. It's in southern Peru. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon. I was there with Piotr Kamilinski, who some of you may know him. He's the first guy to kayak the length of the Amazon and the first guy to kayak this particular gorge, which is phenomenal. Now, you see it's rugged. We had some problems on this trip, and you can see here's what the place looked like. And we had one of our members take a bad fall, and he was stopped by a big patch of cactus. That saved his life, but we had a lot of issues with it. He had some bad lacerations, and I had to orchestrate an evacuation deep in the Andes Mountains, which is not easy to do. It's a lot of technical difficulties doing that. Then back to Mongolia again. And like my wife used to say, who goes to Mongolia twice? Well, we do. We're explorers, right? And this was for John Hare. I don't know if you've ever seen him. He spoke at the club several years ago about the discovery of this third species of camel. We're familiar with the 2-humped and the 1-humped camels. The Bactrian is the 2-humped camel that I'm riding up in the corner there, and we went 800 miles into the Gobi Desert to the most godforsaken place you've ever seen, the Taklamakan Desert, which is on the adjacent to the Gobi. It's in the China-Mongolia border. And this new species of camel, there are only 1,000 of them around, but they're very old. They predate by 700,000 years the common ancestor of the Bactrians and the dromedary camels that we're familiar with. But this is the middle of summer in Mongolia, and it's supposed to be a desert, right? Well, it rained biblically for 3 days and nearly washed out the roads. We had a lot of issues with that. And of course, there's snow on the mountain passes that we had to go through. So very harsh climate, but beautiful. And this camel was fascinating. I got within about 30 feet of this one. Also been able to dive the Atocha here in Florida, which is in the Keys. This is the most famous Spanish treasure galleon when they've taken over $500 million worth of gold and precious cargo off of there. Here's a piece that we found the day we got out there. This is from the Princess of Spain's belt. It's 24 karat gold, filigreed beautifully with a precious stone in the middle there. So that was a fascinating dive. And those guys are Explorers Club members too. Next, we'll talk for a minute about the Boy Scouts, and then I'll yield the stage to the next speaker. I'm a vice president of the National Eagle Scout Association, and they asked me to see if I could do something with exploration with the Scouts. Well, they had sent somebody in 1926 to the South Pole with Admiral Byrd, and basically, he got so excited, he came back and became a meteorologist and developed the wind chill factor. So they were excited about it. They'd like to do that. It's difficult to go back to the Antarctica though. So I said, why not go everywhere? So, we have a lot of friends in the Explorers Club, and that's exactly what we've done. But I also created the Exploration Merit Badge. They didn't have a merit badge for exploration. And so we created this merit badge. I wrote the booklet, and this is the logo that was selected of the Indiana Jones hat. You can figure that out pretty quickly. And the whip, which they objected to at first, but all the boys said, where's the whip? So the whip was put into the logo. Anyway, fascinating. We created the World Explorer program, and we've been able to send Eagle Scouts to these places. So to the Amazon, very remote area of the Amazon, to Galapagos, to the research station, above the Arctic Circle with Martin Nguyen to the Smithsonian Narwhal Tusk Research Program, South Africa for paleoanthropology with Lee Berger and 2 new early human species. And on and on. Mammoth Cave. We work with NASA astrobiology in Yellowstone in remote areas. Dinosaur excavations, and then bald eagle banding in upper Michigan and Minnesota. So I will just end it. We just got a lot. And one last thing to say about this. We now have 16 new members of the Explorers Club that were Eagle Scouts that did their expeditions here. We get new members every year from these expeditions. And they're very sharp people. These are the cream of the crop of Eagle Scouts, which is already pretty specialized. So I'll end with this quote that a friend of mine said to me, and I really liked it. And I think this defines what we do. It says, you may not be able to make life longer, but you can make it wider. And I think that summarizes what we all do as explorers. So I thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Bruce.
Dr. Mike, thank you very much. Dr. Mike Manyak is a typical example of a type of member that we have in our club. The people that we have are people that lived up north, got tired of the cold, and moved down to southern Florida where it's nice and warm. So we're great to have you, Mike. Mike's a new member of our chapter.
Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome. Our next speaker is David DeBerard, who lives in the northern end of our district, which is up in the Palm Beach County. And David is going to give us a good explanation on what it's like to dive in some blue holes. David.
Thanks, Bruce. I live up in Palm Beach, and as you can see behind me, we have a pretty spectacular sunset tonight. It's about a high of 72 today, so I know a lot of you guys are tuned in from the Great White North. Back in August, I was able to join an expedition called the Green Banana Expedition, which is studying the blue holes in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a 3-year ongoing project. Blue holes are essentially a vertical cavern caused by sinkholes in what would otherwise be a flat seabed. So you can see these vertical walls just covered in marine life. A lot of people are familiar with the famous blue hole down in Belize, seen photos of it. And not a lot of studies have been done of these blue holes. These blue holes project is being headed by Dr. Emily Hall of Mote and Jim Cutler, also at Mote. And the study is being supported by a grant from the NOAA. And we have scientists from Harbor Branch, Georgia Tech, United States Geological Survey, and of course, Mote Marine. A lot of questions that are being posed by this expedition. So if these blue holes are connected to the Florida aquifer, whether they contribute to the red tide phenomenon in the Gulf of Mexico, what kind of organisms can live in an environment that's almost totally devoid of oxygen and devoid of sunlight. So the difficulty with studying these blue holes is the logistics involved. This blue hole from August It's about 50 miles west of Sarasota. And the opening of the hole, these photos were taken at about 160 feet. At that time, we didn't know the exact depth of the bottom of the blue hole, but we're planning for a dive to about 425 feet. The main focus was to deploy the benthic lander. This device was developed specifically for this project and looks a lot like a lunar lander. So you can see in the back of the boat here, it has to be held up by that crane. And the device goes in, or it's deployed by divers, and it sits on the bottom for 24 hours collecting data the whole time over and over and over. So it begs the question, why even use divers? It's so deep. I'm sure Dr. Messing could attest that an ROV would be much safer, but with the tether having to be attached to the boat of an ROV, it makes sense for the divers to bring it down. It's probably the best time to apologize to my mother who's listening that I may have downplayed my involvement in the project a little bit, but I made it safe and sound, so that's great. The benthic lander was placed by myself and Marty Watson on day one. Weighs about 600 pounds. So we had to use these sea scooters you can see there to maneuver it to the bottom. The top of the hole was about 85 degrees and good visibility. When we get to the bottom, there's zero sunlight and the entire bottom is just a blanket of sediment. It's almost like a eerie Stephen King novel. So as soon as the lander touches down and we get it into the area we need it to, it blows out all that sediment and visibility is then reduced to zero. So the core samples we took immediately after were done all by feel. Every minute or so that we spend at that depth takes about an hour of decompression coming up. So we have to make quick work while we're down there. And we had a full team of support divers up top, full support on the surface. We had another team that recovered the lander on the second day and then a full day to study the data that they collected. And then on Thursday, that same team that recovered it, deployed it again. And on Friday, we went down for the second time to pick it up. So in total, the lander was deployed twice for 48 hours, brought back a lot of very good data that's still being digested by the scientific teams from all those institutions. This is just the beginning of a 3-year project. This will be ongoing exploration into different blue holes, and we'll be going back to the Green Banana Sink in August and also May of this year. And then from there, we'll pivot and look at some more new holes, new blue holes that haven't been looked at yet. If anybody wants to see some more information on this, PBS did a documentary on the first expedition in 2019 to the Amberjack hole. And that documentary was actually nominated for an Emmy. So it's definitely a great watch. And if you look on the internet, Google Green Banana Expedition, Amberjack Sink Expedition, there are a lot of news outlets that picked up this story. Popular Mechanics, Vice, CNN, Fox. They definitely got a lot of information out there and had a lot of people following the expedition, which is great, seeing as how it's only the beginning of an ongoing project. So we're really excited for what's coming next. Can't be more proud and happy to be involved with these individuals and the power behind the institutions to get this going. It's been really a spectacular journey, and I can't be humbled and thankful enough. Thanks, guys. Bruce, you want to
All right, David,
take
thank you
over?
very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I hope you're not in the doghouse with your mother. Our next speaker is Katie Shoultz. Katie is a new member of the Explorers Club, and she has a very interesting project, particularly because Southern Florida, surrounded by water, has a lot of coral. So Katie, would you please tell our members of the chapter what you're doing with the younger students?
Yes, thanks, Bruce. I'm happy to be here today. Give me just one moment. I'll get my information up here. So just a little bit about myself. I am a biologist by training and a scuba instructor by trade. I'm incredibly fortunate that those two things have come together for me in my work with Scuba Nauts International, which is a scientific diving organization for teens. So we work with students aged 12 to 18, and the mission is essentially to build character and leadership through scientific diving and other marine research activities. So we have chapters in 3 states at this point, and most of our work is student-led. Again, our goal is to build leadership and exploration and research skills. So we've been involved in all kinds of projects, ranging from coral restoration to archaeology. We've done dive physiology studies, photogrammetry, ROVs. All of our research is done under the guidance of professional scientists who guide the students through developing their projects, but it really is student-led, so our interests vary as our students' interests vary. So today, as Bruce mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on 2 of our student projects regarding seagrasses. So in Florida, especially Southern Florida and all of these coastal communities that we have, seagrass are one piece of a landscape ecology between mangroves, seagrass beds, and the coral reefs. And if any one of those ecosystems or habitats suffers, we see the impacts across that entire range. So seagrass are especially important. They act as a nursery ground for fish and invertebrates. They act as a carbon sink, and they provide food for grazing species like sea turtles and manatee that are very prominent in Florida. So if you've ever visited the Tampa Bay area, you may be familiar with the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, which is pictured here. This is a phenomenal suspension bridge that spans the mouth of Tampa Bay itself. And there's a large shipping channel there, but other than the channel, it's all seagrass. And in 1990, it needed some construction and renovations. Part of the permit to do that, one of the requirements from the Florida Department of Transportation was that they did some mitigation to offset the environmental impact. So at the south end of the bridge, they built a breakwater and transplanted seagrasses behind it. And it was monitored for some time, but in 2011, the site was released, which essentially means that no one is monitoring it any longer. So this young gentleman proposed for his Master Knot project. It's our equivalent of an Eagle Scout project. He wanted to go back to this site and see how it was doing. He asked if mitigation sites are not studied post-release, how do we know they're sustainable? How do we know that these restoration efforts are working in the long term? So with some funding from the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, he identified the mitigation area, which you can see outlined in purple on your screen here, and found a naturally occurring seagrass bed next door, which he was able to use as a control. So we went snorkeling. It's only a few feet of water here, and did some transects and quadrats quantifying that seagrass. And what he was able to demonstrate was that, in fact, seagrass mitigation works. From that release date in 2011 to when this data was gathered in 2018, there was a significant increase in the amount of vegetation there. And there was just a slight difference between that mitigated site and the natural site. So these 2 seagrass beds being so near to each other are really good controls. They have the same water quality parameters, the same tidal flow. A lot of those other things are similar. So he did notice that the species distribution varied quite a bit between the mitigated and the natural site. At the time, we hypothesized that that may have been due just to the replanting process or perhaps some sediment grading with that breakwater wall there. But we carried on with these surveys after he put his results together. And we did eventually notice that the species distribution changes with the seasons. So that's another possible reason that we saw that. We did also find that the species distribution at the mitigated site really matched closely to the species distribution at the north end of the bridge. So just a couple of miles across there, and we were seeing the same things. So again, in this instance, some really good evidence that mitigation is working, which is fantastic news. So taking this a step farther, I mentioned one of the critical functions of seagrass beds is as a nursery habitat. So this young lady, Diana Phillips, wanted to take this research just a little bit farther and see if it was creating a healthy habitat. How were we seeing fish and invertebrates use this mitigated area compared to how they were using the neighboring natural areas? So over the course of a year, we used seine nets, sediment cores, and some more roving surveys to quantify the juvenile fish species and invertebrates that we found. And her results were interesting as well. A little bit more evidence that mitigation was working. We were seeing the same species richness and abundance of fish and invertebrates in the mitigated and naturally occurring seagrass beds. However, we did not find any living mollusks in these surveys, which is a bit disconcerting. In the original permit release reports, there were several species of mollusks found, and those are no longer being seen in either area. So that potentially indicates a decline in the health of this site over time. But further research is kind of needed to follow up on that. It was a smaller sample size for this study. We took a bit of a break from our seagrass work in 2020, but we do plan to continue with the seagrass and the fish survey so that we have a continuing baseline of what this site looks like. And it's also sparked a third student to begin a similar project looking at oyster bed restorations. So really just trying to determine the efficacy as we invest so much time in restoration, whether it's seagrass, whether it's oysters, whether it's coral. Understanding if it's working in the long term is really essential to refining our methods, refining the locations we choose for those type of activities. So hopefully some interesting stuff coming up regarding oyster beds as well. So if you want to keep up with us and see how that goes, here's my information here. And I will turn it back over to Bruce.
Thank you very much, Katie. Our last speaker this evening is Rosemarie. Rosemarie has been around since the year 1990, so she's well versed in all the aspects of the Explorers Club. She has been documenting animals in Africa for over 40 years. She has been our chapter chair. She is our current treasurer. She does a great job of keeping the club going. So Rosemarie, please let us know what you have to say, please.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Bruce. I think that Kevin is going to be assisting me with the photos. Yes, okay. This is about a flag expedition with me and with Fernando Fred Galan, my partner. He is MN'14. After arriving in Atlanta on our way to Johannesburg, South Africa, we received an email that we had been awarded an Explorers Club flag. The challenge was that we were leaving for the airport at noon the following day. Amazingly, the flag was delivered by 10 a.m. on our way as a flag expedition. And thank you so much. After flying to Johannesburg, Fred and I hired a Toyota Land Cruiser 4x4 with a tent on the top. we headed out on our solo self-drive safari to Hwange National Park, Zimbabwe. It was the beginning of a 36-day, 3,000-mile safari across much of southern Africa. May we please have photo number 2? Thank you. Wildlife and Environment Zimbabwe, also known as WES, is a private voluntary organization managed by volunteers. They work very closely with Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority in scheduling and overseeing the annual counts in the park. The Hwange counts are usually during the full moon in September or October, the hottest and driest time of the year. West has also taken on the responsibility of replacing countless old diesel water pumps with electric pumps powered by solar panels. In 2019, Wes Matabele branch celebrated their 50th annual count of the animal and bird populations of the park. The night before the game count, there are briefings at all the camps in the park. The main camp briefing is the largest group. And may we have the next photo, please? Zimbabwe National Park staff and West volunteers give reports including any new park regulations, flyovers of the park to see the water levels, general conditions in the park, fires, poaching, and any other information that we need. Fred and I also gave a talk to explain that this was an Explorers Club flag expedition. For this count, there were 94 teams, 343 participants, with 120 coming from 11 other countries. And may we have the next photo, please? Thank you. We always try to arrive at our assigned pan at least an hour before noon, so we can choose the best vantage point for our game count for the next 24 hours. We were assigned Bomani Camp Pan in a private concession on Ngamo forest land, which borders the park. When we arrived at our pan, it was full of hippos. During the day, the water level went down and the hippos all left before dark. And the most interesting thing was they didn't come back while we were there. So we don't know where they went. Next photo, please. And this will be it. There are many objectives to the project. The most important is determining the different species of mammals and the number of them in the park. Total overall counts in 2019 included 40,675 elephants, up from about 23,000 in 2018. The elephant are also 65% of the total animal population. And that's a picture of Fred Galan, Rosemary Twinam, flag number 61, and a large sable antelope bull at Bomani Pan. While staying awake and counting all the animals that come to the pan are exciting, being awarded the Explorers Club flag was even more, especially this flag, which has been out on expeditions since 1935. Thank you so much. That's our presentation.
Thank you, Rosemary. Well, all of you, thank you very much for a very enlightening set of stories about all the things that you've done all around the world. I'm just going to wrap up the Southern Florida chapter with a few comments. Number one, we have people who come down from the Northeast and mid part of the United States for the winter. So we have an active season that runs from approximately October through May. And we try and rotate a banquet facility for a dinner, usually on Sunday evening, with a lecture, or we go to a site. And we have been to all kinds of sites. For example, the Montgomery Foundation. We've been to an underwater habitat in the Florida Keys, and we've done different sites, for example, with Dr. Chuck Messing's generosity at the Nova Southeastern University, which has a beautiful view of the Port Everglades Harbor. We have meetings throughout the winter, and we have guest lecturers. We also have lectures like you've received tonight from our members. And then we also have a sponsorship program for scholarships. This started in 1992, and most of them are graduate students, and they're studying local issues, including animals. So, Tim, that's about the sum total of the Southern Florida chapter of the Explorers Club. We thank you very much for letting us have a chapter connect with you tonight.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure. Thank you for your wonderful presentations. Very interesting. I'm going to start off the questions. I wanted to ask David, actually. This is a personal question for me. I've done some wreck diving in my younger years off the East Coast. And, we would decompress hanging on a line for like 30 or 40 minutes or so. When you're diving down to 400 feet under saturation, how do you decompress coming up?
The same way. It's just a little bit slower, and we'll start our stops a little bit deeper, but still the majority of our decompression will be at 20 feet, which was pretty tough when we're planning a dive from 50 degrees for about 8 minutes and then spending the rest of the time in 85-degree water. Also, with the clarity of the water, sunburns are a big issue. So I would actually bring my sun buff and cover the back of my neck while we hung out. Occasionally, I'll even bring books, paperback books that I can read one page at a time and stuff the pages back into a Ziploc. Otherwise, you're just looking at a lot of blue water.
Wow, how much hang time are you talking about?
Anywhere from 3 to 5 hours for that project.
Oh my God, I can see the sunlight would be a problem. Mike, I wanted to ask you, I've done some expedition stuff, nothing quite like what you've done, of course, but what was the worst thing you've encountered on any of your expeditions that you've had to deal with?
Well, I've been fairly lucky in that respect. I mean, we try to prepare as much as possible, as you're probably aware. So part of the ability to escape difficulties is be prepared ahead of time and have everybody on the same page as far as preparation and having insurance prepared and supplies and all that. I think the worst thing I had was really that rescue in the Andes Mountains that I showed you. We had to really evacuate that guy. He had bad lacerations down to his tendons. I didn't know if he had internal injuries or closed head injuries or possibly a spleen or liver injury. And I watched him like a hawk all night until we could come in with a helicopter at first light, because coming into the Andes Mountains at 9,000 feet in the dark, nobody was excited about that. So we had, fortunately, he was pretty stable, and well, he was stable. He just had bad lacerations. I had to control his pain, and we got him out of there. He's eternally grateful to us for that. He says I saved his life, which I didn't, but I said, that's all right. Thank you. I'm happy to help you and be there when you needed it. So, but minor things usually. Now on the Titanic trip, we had a lot of crazy stuff. You're in the North Atlantic and you're 36 hours from the nearest land. And so I had an attempted suicide. We had a cook that was right out of a central casting. The guy was drunk the entire time. And I was terrified he's going to start a fire or poison us, or we're all going to get diarrhea or something from somebody like that. So I had to watch him like a hawk too. And aside from that, though, most of the expeditions we've been relatively lucky. I haven't had any real major issues. We've run across a few people in the field too. We had a guy fall off a horse in Mongolia that was with another group, and he needed CT of his abdomen and his spine and everything, so an MRI and stuff like that. So he had to be evacuated, but I wasn't involved in that. So.
Patrick, a question for you about the palm. One thing I was surprised at when I was in Papua New Guinea is that there actually are cultures that use the palm, sago palm in this particular case, as a staple. They actually make a flour out of it and this porridge, and they make pancakes out of it. Are there any other cultures that you're aware of that do the same thing, or are there is it just specific to this one type of palm?
So the palm that you're talking about is perfectly suited for that use because it has that really starchy sort of center, and you can really get a lot of nutrition out of it. Most other palms aren't like that, and you can definitely eat palm hearts, you know. And I've actually done that post-hurricane around here. We have a lot of palm trees. If they fall over, if it's going to die, we make a salad out of it, and that's kind of nice. You can try different ones. But the ones that I showed in my presentation, the main use for those is for thatching for roofs. And that's one of the reasons why it's so imperiled, is that people used to overexploit the leaves for thatch, and it would basically kill the palm.
And do you have any questions from our audience?
No, I was just going to say something, Patrick. You know, when I was in Central Africa, they made a lot of wine out of that palm, you know, palm sap or whatever it was. So there's another use there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen those in Senegal, same species, and it's fantastic. We had on that expedition, we were with an ethnobotanist. So we were actually going around and talking to these different guys who tapped these wild palms and made their own palm wine. And we sampled quite a few of these, and they're pretty good stuff.
So I just want to say hi to everybody this evening and welcome to all our viewers out there. Bruce, you did a terrific job in bringing all these incredible people together. And my first question is for you. It's from Bill Steele, who's down in Texas. He wants to know, do your chapter meetings move around to different Florida cities, or do you meet in the same city all the time?
No, we move around. We've had meetings in Key Largo, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. And whenever we have an opportunity to go to a place, we do, yes.
Sounds terrific. Jenny is also asking, this one is for Patrick. Is there a booklet for the care and maintenance of palm trees for the species located in Mauritius or the Seychelles?
Yes, I think one of the best references for that, there's this booklet called the Encyclopedia of Cultivated Palms. And it's basically about every species. The species that you're mentioning, the ones from Mauritius and the Seychelles, are very, very popular in horticulture. And so there's a lot known about that growing in different climates.
I believe that Jenny is from Mauritius, and she often speaks so highly of how beautiful the palms are over there. So I'm sure she's always interested in hearing about news that's going on. Okay, so our next question is, let's see. Michelle, question for Katie from a diver in Hawaii. You mentioned scuba knots, chapters in 3 states besides Florida and North Carolina. And what other states do you operate, and would love to see this offering here in Hawaii?
Yes, great question. Thank you. We just last month, actually, it's been in the work for quite some time. We just launched a chapter in Savannah, Georgia. So we have several Florida chapters, the one in Georgia and one in North Carolina. But we have developed a fairly strong template. So for Hawaii, it sounds wonderful. I'd love to come see you. But for anyone that's listening, if you were interested in starting a chapter in your local area, there's some information about that on our website. But we'd be happy to chat with you about getting something going. The primary components are you do need a some kind of professional scientist that can lead the science side of things, as well as a dive instructor to act in a dive safety capacity. And then of course, interested youth 12 to 18.
Okay, here's one for Rosemary from Edie. How has COVID affected the park in Zimbabwe? I know many parks had to reduce staff considerably, especially rangers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'm not sure about all of that. But I do know that when they had the count this year, that all of the participants were from Zimbabwe. And so they were all local people. And we were not allowed, we would not have been allowed to go in. You know, about that time, people from the US were blocked on a lot of travel. So having to go through South Africa, Botswana, and into Zimbabwe wouldn't have been allowed.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that. I was in Tanzania back in September for the Great Migration, and there other than our small group of people, there was nobody there. Just skeleton crews at the tent camps, just maintaining them basically. It was a wonderful experience for us, but it's just devastating for their economy.
Yes.
Here's one for Chuck. Can you recommend some interesting projects in your field to young graduate students? This is from Luna.
Well, it's open season on the taxonomy of crinoids, basically. We're still describing new species. It's a tough group to get in on, but I would say close to a quarter of known species. I didn't mention this, there are over 600 species of living crinoids that have been described, and more than, I would say, certainly more than 20% of them are known from only a few, if more than, or less than 5 specimens. And much of my work is trying to decide where one species begins and another one leaves off. It's still very much in the alpha taxonomy stage. And of course, the more we collect, the more molecular work can be done to try and solve some of these problems. So for example, there's a species of crinoid feather star throughout the Western Atlantic in moderately deep water that has been described from 20 different species originally and now combined as one. And I think there's certainly more than one species there. So there's just all of these taxonomic problems that we still have.
Anna, are you there? You're kind of frozen up on us. I think we've lost Ann. Ann? Okay, well, I think she's going to come back on in a second, but in the meantime, so Katie, I wanted to ask you, is there a possibility that this could expand to the West Coast? Because San Diego is very well known for its diving and its kelp beds. And I happen to have a friend who runs the biggest diving operation, scuba diving operation here. Plus we have Scripps Institution. So how plausible do you think it would be for us to be able to start something up like this?
I would say it's certainly plausible. Just like the person from Hawaii who asked, the key components are just having some good adult leadership. A huge part of the program, as I mentioned, is youth-led, student-led, but it's under the guidance of professional researchers, explorers, divers that can point them in the right direction. They are incredibly good at coming up with research questions. They're so excited. They have so many ideas. They don't seem to be bound back by some of the what ifs and the logistics that we sometimes jump to as professionals. So it's great if you just need adults to harness that energy and connect them to resources. And the club has been a huge asset in doing that for our existing chapters. But I think San Diego would be another phenomenal location, and we're not necessarily limited to places that are coastal. It does make it easier. You can go diving more often when you're coastal like that. But I would say as long as you've got the professional guidance and leadership in place, there's definitely opportunities to start a chapter.
Great. I think I'm going to actually start looking into that for us here, because if we don't have anything like that, because I think it'd be a wonderful experience and we have the resources. It's just a matter of getting people in the water.
Yep.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened there, but it's, part of this new technology. So I apologize. Have you ever thought of maybe taking some youngsters down with David, and maybe David could help out? It sounds like they might have a wonderful opportunity that way.
Oh, I have some students that would love to meet you, David. We also have guest speakers all the time, so you'll be hearing from me again soon.
Good. Look forward to it.
So it's really nice because so many people here haven't met each other. So now you know that there are so many more opportunities for our members to get in touch with all of you. And David, you want to just expand a little bit more on some of the other programs that you have going on?
That's been the main focus right now. I felt really grateful and happy that we were able to get that going in the middle of COVID. I think we were very fortunate to have everyone that was very close by available to be on the teams. We weren't relying on anyone from outside the country who wouldn't have been able to come in. So moving forward, I think the team will definitely expand, and Moat has many opportunities in everything from dolphin tracking to deep sea blue hole exploration and everything in between. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and that's the best thing about this club is connecting everybody. And I would love to talk with anybody who wants to get involved. There's always a place to volunteer.
Sounds terrific, and I'm sure people are going to be reaching out to you. We have another question from Llewellyn to Patrick. I understand that palm oil cultivation is a driving force behind deforestation and jungle destruction around the world. What can be done to incentivize the growers of these palms?
So this is such a difficult issue, the one that you brought up. And it's exactly like you described. The demand for palm oil keeps going up and up and up, and it creates lots and lots of deforestation. And ironically, many palms are going extinct in these places before we have a chance to describe them. So it's a very sad thing. I don't know what the solution is, but I imagine it has to do with reducing demand for palm oil. So we have to find some sort of substitute that's much more sustainably farmed.
So clearly that's something that we all need to do research on, and hope that we can find a solution for that really severe problem.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much takes care of all of our questions for this evening. But I want to say a big thank you, especially to Bruce for pulling all of this together, and Rosemary as well. You did a great job. And thank you to Mike and to Charles and to Patrick and Katie and David and all of you for being a part of this special Southern Florida Chapter Connect. It's really, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of people that are going to write to you whenever they come down to Southern Florida so that they can dive or come and see palm trees and go into the ocean and meet Rosemary, who's at the zoo a lot of the time as well. She was telling me at the Miami Zoo. Is that correct, Rosemary?
Yes, Zoo Miami. Yeah, thank you.
So for all of you out there watching, please contact our fellow members down in Miami and Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach and every place that you want to go to in Florida. And a big thank you to Joe DeTore as well for helping us out here too. And I just want to say a wonderful evening, especially to you, Bruce. I really appreciate it.
Well, Ann,
Tim?
None of this would have happened without you. So let's be honest. You are the one who really did all the work, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, but it's a very special opportunity to be able to connect everyone. So for next week, we're still waiting for our Western European chapter, Tim, to get back to us.
Oh.
And we're hoping to have them. If not, we'll have a different program for you. And then the week after, I believe that's your chapter. Is that right?
Yes, 2 weeks from now, San Diego is going to present. We have a pretty good lineup. It's going to take into account aeronautics, underwater, jungle. I think it should be pretty interesting.
So how are you going to work that, Tim? Are you going to do a split screen and introduce yourself?
Yeah, split personality. Yeah. I'll be introducing our new chapter chair, but I'm pretty much, since I put it all together, I'm going to be basically doing the job of interviewing people as a chapter chair does. So, but yeah, it should be very interesting, and I'll just make do.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody for watching this evening and all of the presenters here. Monday night, we have a very special presentation for you with Richard Garriott, who's going to be interviewing Alan Stern from New Horizons and one of the first people to go into outer space on Virgin. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to be happening in the near future. And he's going to tell you all about the different possibilities and the research he's going to be doing. And it's an extraordinary evening. So I hope you'll all tune in to watch. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Stay well, stay safe, and stay warm down in Florida. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
have a
you.
good evening, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Yep.
Aloha.